You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first, as always. Now, some of your messages on the back of the what happened in Wa and also in Ejura. Dr. Charles Reku Brobe says that the infection of our hitherto professional security agencies with party foot soldiers and apparatchiks imbued with a sense of entitlement is the major cause of breakdown in discipline and breakout of hooliganism in our armed forces and police. Then Azindo says the army is a revered institution of discipline. To ensure the happenings in Wa is never repeated, the military high command must identify and punish the individuals involved in the act so it serves as a lesson to others. Nyavo John says Ejura killings was a predetermined act. They were sending a clear signal to intimidate and put fear in the Fix the Country demonstrators in Accra. Papa J. Jr. says, we have a human rights lawyer as president, and this is the state our innocent country has been put to. Brutality here and there, and His Excellency is not acting. Well, he's giving some orders. Let's see what results we get. Kofi Amwa, and you see I edited your commentary because we can say what we want to say without sounding insulting, especially to the elderly. Kofi Amwa, it is the same security service that was quick and apt in identifying coup plotters. That is slow and inept in protecting the citizens. In whose interests do they act? The governor or the governed? Then this one, you don't give your name, you say justice for Kaka. The IGP and other ministers responsible for our security have all come out time and again to justify their call for use of brute or excessive force in the manner we have seen of all the issues we are dealing with. So setting up a three-man committee is a waste of time. All right, so those were your views. Then Yakubu Ibn Chambers says that the good one amongst the security services in Ghana are few and the bad ones are all over. I thought it's the other way around. Even if those soldiers who perpetrated the dastardly acts in Wa and Ejura are recruits, they could have applied demands of reasonableness as humans themselves. The recruitment process has to be checked because the reputation of Ghana security is on the line. Yes, okay. Musa Abattoir says, I find it very useful to share my opinion regarding the subject. What is happening regarding security atrocities is what I call leadership crisis. It all boils down to leadership. If the leadership fails to act appropriately, the unethical behavior and lawlessness exhibited by the military will continue. All right, so let's end it here and then go to bread and butter matters. Of course, okay, I can read this from Kojo Ahodo. Kojo Ahodo says, this has nothing to do about who gave instructions or who asked for the military to get involved. This is a normal practice. What should be done is to have those who misconducted themselves disciplined. Kojo Ahodo sent that from the UK. He says the military is a very disciplined body and we know them for who they are. YK Ansa Yeboah, that will be my final comment I'll read. Says he's disappointed in uncomfortable and disappointed in Kofi, Professor Kwesi Enin, the narrative that he continues to rehash and having hope and so on. He says, he has said that since 2014, at least, Ghana is virtually, he says, a failed state due to perpetual institutional failures and dysfunctional systems in place. The only reason why it is not obvious is that people are not on the street fighting. All right? All right. Thanks, all of you, for your messages. Now, let's begin to talk about where to sleep, where to sleep, where to get premises to do business, and how that is affecting very many people. We have a housing deficit of as much as 2 million or more, but that's just the official figure. There are some who believe that the figure should be far more than that. I have guests in the studio who can help us, and also via Zoom who can help us to better appreciate the situation and to give us solutions. And we're going to deal directly with you. Let's have your questions. We have a number of them coming already. I'll put it to them for them to answer. Now, joining us via Zoom is Chum Ampofo. Right here, Chum Ampofo. He is Chief Rent Officer, Rent Control Department. And then Emmanuel Hove-Posu, who is Head, Public Relations, Rent Control Department. By Zoom is Kojo Biney, Director, Vine CBH Group, an immediate past Executive Council member of GREDA. Gentlemen, thank you very much for making the time to join us on Newsfile.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Right. Mr. Kojo Biney, can you try so we know we have you clear?
Yeah, sounds like I can hear you.
Great to have you. Okay, so when we are told that we have a housing deficit of 2 million and so on and so forth, how are we supposed to process that? And so what? We have heard this over and again. And so what?
Okay. Good morning to the panelists and to our fellow Ghanaians. The figures for housing deficit have been updated regularly. Previously, it was 1.7 million, and now our minister has come out with a new figure of over 2 million.
Yeah.
If I'm to be. Now, these figures are based on what the UN Habitat sees as the people who actually need housing. And so they take the statistics that we have from here and look at that. But for us, what we should be looking at is the effective demand for the housing that is available. The figure of 2 million, if we say we are going to meet it today and we build 2 million homes, majority of them are actually going to be empty. Okay, and so it's not just a question of taking the headline figure and then putting pressure to say this is the goal and this is where we need to get to. There is a bit more to it than that. But I'm sure as we go on, we'll get into the detail of it.
Is that why we are told that
housing deficit of
is that why we are told that out of this excess, estimated in excess of 2 million housing units that we need, you have an estimated 60% of Ghanaians who will need some form of assistance to be able to access housing?
Yes, that's part of the issue. Okay, now the 60% you talk about are people who cannot afford to pay for housing and would need some support. And so if you look at the 2 million deficit, then and you take 60% out of it, there's only 40 of it that really, if they are built, will be occupied or will be sold or may even be rented because some of these people cannot even afford the rent. And so social housing needs to be part of the equation when it comes to thinking of solutions.
Interesting. And I realize from your end, perhaps, I don't know who to start with. Let me start with your boss. Okay. I realize from your end that your 2019 statistics show that in excess of 70-something 2% of the people who come to you with problems, it's about payment of rent. So it ties in what he says.
Okay. Good morning, fellow Ghanaians. It's exactly so, because looking at the vulnerable people in the country, and as my brother earlier said, that we can even provide a 2 million housing, but how many people will be able to maybe either purchase or to rent? It all depends, maybe the work that people found themselves in. More so, getting the 2 million for the people, are we saying that, is it within the urban areas alone or within the other regions? When you look at renting aspect, it normally based on capitals and cities. So if we are saying 2 million deficit, are we saying that we are building the whole 2 million across the regions and the districts or capitals? And the question is, having put up such kind of housing, the work that people must do for them to pay their rent is also a difficult thing to do. So I think he's right.
So like everybody acknowledges so far, even if you put up the housing, it will be expensive, people cannot afford. Then the suggestion is that we should have social housing inclusive of that. So that clearly explains why you have as many as 72% who come to you knocking on your door and the issue is about rent.
Yes.
Even if they can't afford the affordable housing, they should be able to pay rent and have a decent living. In a situation where it is free for all, everybody determines how much they are charging and getting quite depressing. How do such people survive? With you placed there by law to ensure that there is some sort of, equity in the way rent goes on in the country.
Okay. Yes, so something. Again, good morning. And then we appreciate the opportunity to speak with the populace on this serious issue in the country. Something, the implementation of the law or any law is a collective responsibility. Since it's a collective responsibility, there are laid down rules and regulations if you want to venture into this commercial aspect of this housing issue. What we always say is that if you build your premises and you want to dwell in personally or want to give it to your daughter, your family member, no act is infringed on you. But when it comes to mind that, no, I want to collect money out of this building I've built, there are rules and regulations, and that comes the Rent Act 1963, Act 220. We can go as far back 1942, where we started this controlling of rent. And there has been several legislative instruments and the purpose for which they were established. If you just give me some few minutes, I'll just go through some of them. Some are very interesting. In 1942, we had what we call Defense Rent Restriction Regulation. And the purpose is to restrict anybody from increasing rent above those of 3rd September 1939, except where an assessment has been made by the Rent Assistance Committee. That was then the name of the department. And then also to restrict eviction by anybody except by court. We look at 1943, which talks about Defense Restriction Amendment Regulation. Then 1947, Rent Control Ordinance. 1949, Rent Control Ordinance Amendment Ordinance. Then 1952, we had what we call Rent Control Ordinance. Then 1960, we had Rent Control Amendment Act 1960. Then we came to 1963, Act 220. Then in 1973, we had Rent Amendment Decree. Then again, in 1982, we had PNDC Law 5. 1986, Rent Control Law. And what was interesting was that in 1956, the 1960, the purpose was to amend the standard rent for those changed in 1st July 1960. We had the PNDC law. The purpose is to ensure no rent could be increased until 1983, 6 months. Also to ensure landlord pay 50% tax on their rent. That's the PNDC Law 5 in 1982. Again, the purpose to ensure any landlord who demand higher than allowed rent or fail to pay the 50% tax forfeit its premises to the state. This is where the interest is, so that you are not supposed to charge more than 50%. If you do that, you forfeit your...
You lose your property.
You lose your property. So
now that's no more the law.
That's no more the law. But I'm just bringing this out, that the control of rent has been there since 1942. And there has been stiffer punishment for those, or stiffer rules that if you don't abide by the rules, as far as you forfeit your premises. So the public should calm down, because we know there are advantages and disadvantages of controlling rent. But in the nutshell, we look at both sides and come to equilibrium, come to so that we will make housing affordable to the tenants or to anybody who wants to rent, to prevent displacement.
Okay.
So that if you have small money, you can get somebody someplace to rent.
That's where we are getting to, sir. And he takes us through a history, very beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have we failed because you say control, and yet there's no control? Everybody is doing what they like, and people are in pain, people are in suffering, they are in hardship because of rent.
Yes, it is true that people are in pain. The reason is that, you see, I can start from initially the population was not as much as today. And moreover, urban migration and the foreigners are also moving to the country. Automatically, rent or housing will be very scarce. And now, if the demand is more than the supply, at the end of the day, landlord will take advantage on that. Again, the influence of the agents who have been, who is not authorized agents, have come in. And before we can even get the public to know that rent is controlled, we need to wipe off the unauthorized agents. Because at times, some of the landlords are not even willing to take advance and to increase rent also. But because agents rely on their charges based on commissions and other this thing, the more they take the advance, the more their commission
goes up.
So when it happens like that, it even led the landlords even to abuse the Section 25(5), which says that no landlord have to take rent advance more than 6 months. So if we are able to get rid of them or regulated the agents.
So here you are repeating this. No landlord is allowed by law to take rent for more than
6 months.
Rent advance for more than 6 months.
Yes.
But we know that that is rather the default position.
Yes.
That landlords are taking 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years even. So what is happening, Emmanuel?
Okay. So something, what is happening is, or what has happened, is that we realized that education at both the landlords and the tenants part were not there. So for the past 2-3 years, we've done a lot of massive sensitization program, of which we are seeing results now. Now, most landlords are now taking monthly. Some landlords are now taking...
Did you say most landlords?
Sorry.
Some.
Some are also taking 6 months. Those who have understood and want to abide by the law. But most landlords, that's where the most come in, are still in their 2 years, 3 years rent advance taking.
You mean they are still breaking the law?
They are still breaking the law.
They are committing the crime.
The crime. And what we've started with my position, okay, what we started doing in my jurisdiction is that I've lined up some landlords before the magistrate. I'm waiting for the verdict so that it can be published for landlords to know that there are sections in the Act that forbids them from taking more than 6 months rent advance if it's a long tenancy. Okay, if it's a short tenancy, the law allows you to take it monthly. If it's a long tenancy, what is it? It means that you can sign an agreement with somebody for 5 years, 2 years, and above. But when it comes to the payment, it should be in blocks of 6 months, until the tenancy ends. So we are waiting for the verdict. I'm pushing the magistrate as a way of sensitizing the people to give me the verdict or the adjudication so that we can publish that.
First of all, and I'll get to the estate development people to get their view on this. First of all, your law, our law, says you can't even advertise your premises for rent unless you, rent control, have come in to do some work and giving some certificate.
Yes.
Tell me how many people are obeying this.
Okay. Yes. So it's a fact. Just as I mentioned, the education is not there. Majority of people go into this venture without learning what pertains in that environment. People just wake up, they build, and then they put for rent on it without going through the legal process.
What's the legal process?
The legal process, the first instance, when you build just as I mentioned, when you build your premises and you want to dwell in or you want to give it to your family member, no law or no act infringe on you. But when it comes to mind that, no, I want to collect money from this, from the building I've built.
Commercial.
If you look from Section 10 to Section 19 of the Rent Act, and specifically Section 10, it said application for an assessment of recoverable rent by an appropriate rent officer, which means the first point, of course, to come to the Rent Control Department, apply for this assessment of recoverable rent. The recoverable rent is the rent you want to charge for the premises. We will come in as a rent control officer or the rent magistrate to assess the place, look at how nice you've built your place, the materials you use, the fittings, and the features. And then we'll come out with an assessment certificate. That assessment certificate will detail how much you are to charge as rent for a period of 2 years. So after the 2 years, you come in and then apply for what we call reassessment. There are some ingredients that we take into consideration when doing the assessment. The first is the property rate you pay, the value of the land on which you've sited your premises. Any rate you pay, we all factor all this into it. Then when we come out with the assessment certificate, we issue into it how much you have to charge for a period of 2 years. When you get the assessment certificate, the first thing now you have the authority to do is to advertise for your premises. So until you get the assessment certificate, you don't have the right to advertise your premises. You have 2 ways, 2 means of advertising. The first one is the agents that we've mentioned now, of which they are to take only 5% of the rent advance that has been paid to the landlord as a commission. but they are flouting it. We've discussed it, and then very soon we'll deal with them. The second aspect is...
What you mean is that there's a new law coming that will take care of
We'll take care of that. Okay. The second avenue is the vacant premise register we have at our offices, which majority of Ghanaians are not aware, that you can register your vacant premises with the Rent Control Department so that the prospective tenants, those roaming about looking for an apartment, can also come in, and when they come and see that the apartment located at this point suits me, we call the landlord, we call you as the prospective tenant, we bring you together to go and document your processes. So after you've gotten somebody, the first thing you have to do after that is to issue the person with what we call a tenancy agreement before even the person pays you the money. That tenancy agreement will spell out the rights and responsibilities of that tenant. You, as a landlord, you have rights and responsibilities. What is the rate or the rent that I have to pay for that period? And the frequency of payment. You need witnesses. Okay? If you are a landlord, you are not aware, you don't have knowledge about this, you have lawyers to consult so that they can help you draft the tenancy agreement. Better still, at the Rent Control Department, we have samples of this tenancy agreement where you come in, we'll explain to you so that you go and amend it so that it will suit you. But in writing the tenancy agreement, you should take into consideration the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You have to take into consideration Article 12.2 of our Constitution, which spells out the fundamental human rights. Okay? There are sections in the Rent Act that you have to consider in coming out with your tenancy agreement. You cannot come out with any fictitious tenancy agreement and want somebody to abide by it. Just recently, some landlord close to Winneba School, I want to mention, he has come out with regulations. And in there, he said, you cannot have a visitor. This is absolutely fictitious. You are infringing on somebody's human right. You brought it that the person has received a visitor, so you are evicting the person. I have to strike the case off. Because first of all, you didn't register the tenancy agreement with us. For us to go through and make sure we remove all those inadequacy in there.
Let me recap briefly and then go and find out one very critical situation for me. What I mean by that is, I don't think you can control something that you don't manage.
Exactly.
So let's ask those who do this business, whether or not the difficulties you face, irrespective of the law and how it empowers what has to be done, is because once you don't manage the property, you can't control it. But you're saying that to start with, if I put up a building and I want to give it out for rent, either for residential purpose or for commercial purpose, then first I must come to rent control. When I come to rent control, you do what is known as an assessment, evaluation. It's professionally done. Once it is done, I'll be issued a certificate. It is that certificate that allows me to now advertise. Then, when somebody comes in to take the property, they must have a tenancy agreement. And that tenancy agreement must be registered with you. Until that is done, they don't have a right to start collecting money. And in the collection of the money to which is the rent, they cannot charge for more than 6 months. Even if it is a 5-year rent agreement. Okay. We will come for you to tell us what the sanctions are and give us examples of who you have made to suffer for not following this particular law. Now, if you are just joining us, we are seeking to empower you, both landlords and tenants, so that once everyone knows their rights, then it might help. We are going to give you the opportunity to participate in this discussion by asking your questions and what situation you may be facing with your rent situation, and they will give you the direct answers, what can be done. Let me ask Kojo Biney the question I had already suggested. How do you control something you don't manage? Is that not what the difficulty they face? Yes, Mr. Biney. Yes, Mr. Biney, my question is to you. Please unmute.
Yes, Samson, the rent control officers. Yes, the rent control officers actually, I just did. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. The rent control officers, they have, okay, they have the act which they have to go by. And so I would rather go up enforceable. And if it is backed by funding, to enforce it. The rent control assessment officers, nationwide, how many do they have? And how many properties are let in a month? Okay, you can see the inadequacies are major. And so it is, very difficult to do. However, if we've gone up to the lawmakers, then we have to look at the situation in the light of, for instance, the socialist government compared to a capitalist government. They all have what they would have promised their people. Okay, the socialist government is supposed to come and say, okay, like as it has been since 1942, we are socialists, or in the PNDC laws and so on. Things are all socialist in those areas. And so you can see that there is a stifling of investment into housing stock. All feed into the deficit. So all these things are fed into the problem we sit with today. And this thing needs to be taken in holistically. Because if today we have a socialist leaning government, they are going to change rents, what you can collect, what you cannot collect, and say it's man's money, okay? Or some people, everything another government comes in, and they say they're capital. Demand and supply will end up somewhere, and we'll have, a perfect market, hopefully. And then you start getting into problems there as well, because those who are, socially challenged will fall out of that net. And so we have to meet at a point somewhere in the middle. And that is where the laws keep changing and favoring one side against the other. So really, there is always going to be political influence.
The line is rather bad.
We need to look at it holistically and see where there is.
Mr. Ampofo's line is rather bad. I think we need to sort it out and get back to it. What's from the basic points? So we're getting people to appreciate both landlords and tenants, so that in the hope that you will also do your job well, and we live in a country of laws, so the laws will be followed, then everybody will be happy.
Yes.
What are the difficulties that you encounter in seeking to make this beautiful law work? That you build your property, you must come to us first, we must do an assessment and give you an assessment certificate. Could it be that your assessment sometimes is arbitrary? You are giving them rates that the landlord feels I've spent so much to build this thing and you want me to charge just how much? Is that not one of the problems?
No. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. You know, assessment have its own factors put together before we can come out with rent.
What are the factors?
The factors is what my brother even said. In the first place, the location of the place. See, the bank overdraft that landlords pay. Then the facilities therein, in that very premises. And also the likewise premises. Likewise premises, for instance, this Kotobabi, you are paying 5 cedis here. Across the road, another house, the same thing, 5 cedis. So you cannot say that upon all the facilities therein and the same facilities here, you cannot say you are taking 5 cedis and here 10 cedis. It all depends on the sizes. It could only change if the size is different. But if the size are the same and the facilities are the same, then it means that rents will. So at the end of the day, when we take all these measures, we put it into scale, then we give out the rent payable per month. So one cannot say that. In fact,
don't you have a situation where landlords are disagreeing with you about what you are trying to sort of, insist should be the charge?
Yes.
And what do you do in such circumstances?
Yeah, it do happen. But when it happens like that, the landlords also have the right to appeal against the decision or your decision. And when decision is being appealed, it goes to court. And it's the court to determine. Because our department is a squashy department, and the final decision rests at the bosom of the judge or the rent magistrate. So at the end of the day, when you get to the rent magistrate or the judge, you will be the final person to determine.
So if there is disagreement as to what the rate should be, then either the person you have assessed the rate for will use that, or they have to go to court.
Yes.
And for the court to decide otherwise.
Exactly so.
How much is this a problem?
No, it shouldn't be a problem. You know, the fear is that a lot of Ghanaians think if they've built the apartment for a long time, we'll be using 1963 iron rod price or cement price to determine the rate. We use current economic rates to do the assessment. The underlying factor has been education. People are not totally aware of this provision in the Act. They can take advantage because at the end of the day, it may even be like what you are charging is even low.
Yes.
Okay? So landlords should avail themselves. It's not anything much to apply for any assessment. It's just like applying for a salmon or just coming for a salmon. Yes, we come and do the assessment. We give you the certificate. Then you can stand on to operate your business. Yes.
So I've got some questions that are coming up, and I will get to them. But briefly, as I understand in the law also, a landlord cannot increase the rent without reference to you.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes.
Yes.
Listen, when you look at Section 19, it talks about landlord prohibited from collecting rent increase resulting from increase in rate without notice. Okay, so no landlord of any premises shall collect from the tenant of such premises any increase in rent attributable to increase in rate in respect of such premises unless he has notified the tenant previously in writing in a prescribed form the amount of the old rent, the amount of the new rent, and where a part or any premises has been let, the amount of the rate attributable to such part, the amount of increase in rent, and the date from which the new rate takes effect. And then subsection 2, when any part of any premises has been let and there has been an increase in rate in respect of the old or such premises, no landlord shall A, fix the amount of the rate attributable to such part, or B, collect the increase in rent in respect of such part unless the amount and increase has been approved, again, has been approved by the rent officer. So this is clear. And then subsection 3, no landlord of or other person interested in any premises shall collect the increase in rate attributable to such an increase in respect of any premises, such increase rate were assessed. Okay, so until the place has been assessed, you don't have the right to increase it. And even if it's increased,
if I have
you have
done
to
some redevelopments, you know, refurbish the place nicely, you know, as they say, pimped it up.
Okay,
why won't I charge extra?
Yeah, so anytime you make an improvement, you come for reassessment. The reassessment is open within the 2 years. You can't wait. Of course, it's an option for you. When you do an improvement, you want to wait till the end of the 2 years before you come for reassessment. It's an option. But within the period, if you turn your painting room into a tiled room and you want to come for reassessment, the reassessment is open within the period. So you come for the reassessment.
If you don't have approval from rent control, you can't charge increase.
That is Section 19 of the Rent Act, 1963, Act 220.
And you know,
you know why I have paused?
Yes. It should come with improvement. You cannot depend on your old rents, your old building, and ask of increment, whereby nothing has been done on it. So we are.
Yes, in fact, for some people, nothing has been done, but they will come and say cement prices have gone up. As if they are now coming to build. They have already built.
Exactly. So,
and they ask you to pay.
Exactly. So that is why you need to come in for us. In fact, it's not only the landlord to report. The tenants also have the right to report at the rent control, saying that my landlord wants to increase my rent. And he can also file a assessment. We invite the landlord and we all go to the kind of question you are asking. We'll go in for inspection and we'll determine whether it's even supposed to increase rent or not. And our recommendation and our listing will work.
Mr. Biney had asked the question, how many officers do you even have in the country? Do you have the capacity to police this law and make sure it works?
No.
Okay. You don't?
Okay.
He says no.
Not no. We have them for now. At first, people thought we don't have that kind of staff to assist. But for now, we have them. The only problem is that, as we said, previously, the education was very low. And now that we have taken the mantle to educate the public to know their rights. So that's what I'm saying, that it is not the only landlord, it's both parties. If one is dissatisfied with whatever the landlord is doing or a party is doing, has every right to report and will respond to it quickly.
Right. Mr. Biney, this will dovetail into the affordable housing situation because the lack of the housing itself, it's the bigger issue. And then the few houses we have, the rent to, we are making it almost impossible for especially, like you have noted, younger people, the poor, young graduates just come out of school, just got a job, doesn't have rent allowance or something, and they are being asked to pay 2 years advance, and they can't afford it because it's just too much. But you are making a point. Let me have you continue that.
Yes, I'm afraid I missed a bit that part of the conversation. However, the general point is that a lot of the controls come from above, from the laws that are enacted. And where the Rent Control Act itself comes in, you know, it stipulates, it creates an environment which I believe is quite rigid. For instance, saying that pay 6 months in advance, or, you know, you can't charge anything. You can't, even if it's a 5-year rental, pay 6 months in advance. It puts pressure on both the renter and the investor who has put money in there and expect a return. Now, our rent control officer, I think it was Mr. Chumampofu, who said that you know, people are forced to pay 2 years in advance and so on. But in today's day and age, most people are
paying rent monthly. Okay, and if you want a place for 6 months, you pay every month, your rent is paid. If you are not...
Did you say most people?
No, may I correct myself? A lot of people. A lot of people. A fairly decent number of people do that. So if I'm collecting my rent monthly, the rent law does not really help me, because the process it will take, okay, to evict someone who doesn't pay for the third month, okay, it does not line up with the law. And so you are caught in between.
That's true.
You know, the law stipulates that when you pay your rent, you cannot evict someone for the first 2 years.
That's right.
That is regardless of the length of time of the rental. And so, if your lender, who has helped you build the house, is demanding their money monthly, there's a disconnect. Okay, so the issues are all over the place, but they all emanate from the rigidity of the laws we actually enact.
All right, so Mr. Biney just made a statement. It's a statement of law, but is it without a caveat that once the landlord brings in the tenant, you cannot evict the tenant until the period has expired, 2 years?
No. What we have under Section 17 is what we call recovery of possession. The first section there is that no tenant has the right to owe any landlord a month's rent. So if you, as a tenant...
So starting with, it's a statement of law,
yes,
but there are exceptions.
Okay.
You can do things that will get your landlord, empower your landlord to remove you.
To apply for order of eviction.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first point is that where any rent lawfully due from the tenant has not been paid or tendered within 1 month after the date on which it becomes lawfully due. So if you as a tenant, you've signed a tenancy agreement for 2 years, and you have been allowed to pay monthly, and you owe that landlord a month's rent, the landlord can just stand on it, apply to the rent control department for order of eviction. So even if the tenant defaults in paying, you, the landlord, has no right to forcefully eject that tenant from your premises.
If the tenant will not move peacefully, you cannot forcefully remove them.
Exactly.
You must go to
the rent control
order.
department or the magistrate and apply for the order of eviction. For us to do investigate why the tenant is not paying.
So
then
do you understand? So do you understand, Mr. Biney?
Yes.
He says this one month rent payment, and when you have to evict somebody, it doesn't gel. You owe me 1 month's rent, and I have to go to rent control. I have to go to the magistrate to get you removed. I may spend more than you will be paying me.
Rent.
No, okay. Under Section 31, there's no free rent. So even the period of adjudication, you are mandated to pay.
Okay.
There's no free rent. It says no landlord should be prevented from any section of this act from collecting its rate or rent. So just as I said, during the adjudication period, the tenant is supposed to pay the rent so far as he's occupying the premises. So the law is that you have to apply for the order of eviction. We are fast-tracking our processes. We are welcoming this digitalization process, which will improve our processes. So when this comes, though it's not yet in, manually we are fast-tracking our processes. So it will not take you so long if an offense has been committed under the Act for us to evict or order any tenant from your premises. So Mr. Biney should not...
you will agree with Mr. Biney, what he talks about and what you just explained. What the law confers on the tenant, what is known as, you become what is known as a statutory tenant. Because your time is due to pay rent. You have not been able to pay the rent. And yet, you cannot be moved out of the place. But you are expected to pay as and when.
Okay.
Do you get it? Say you have a 2-year rent.
Yes. Okay.
The 2 years have come. You don't have money to pay extra.
Yeah.
Then you have to stay in and then pay on the old
rent,
the old tenancy. If you are not moving peacefully, the landlord then has to go through you or to the court to get the person to move out because of the principle of irremovability status that the person will enjoy as a statutory tenant.
Yes.
Is that fair to the landlord? You have rented my premises. Your time is up. But the law says if you will move peacefully, I can't move you forcefully. You must stay there and still pay me the old rent.
And until I take you to court before you have been ejected.
Is that fair?
It's not fair, but you see, that is what the law have been stated. And we cannot go contrary to the law. So if we are to go by the law, then we make sure that we follow the suit or we follow the bills. So we are advising landlords that don't wait until tenants default so much payment before you come. The law have given or stated clear that within 1 month, if one fails to pay his rent, you can report. So don't expect the tenant to go 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. By the time of 3 months, and if you are able to file the case, I think you could have even get, or you have to get your premises before the 3 months or the date of statutory this.
Interesting. So as I informed you, in due course, we will open the lines for you to share your problems directly, landlords and tenants, and get direct answers to them. But this is intended to educate and empower you so that both landlord and tenants can deal in a situation that makes all of us happy. This, you can't charge advance for 2 years. What happens if I do it? Because people are doing it anyway.
Okay.
What happens?
Let me.
Yes.
In fact, the law has stated clear under section 25(5) that no landlord have the right to take 2 years or rent advance more than 3 months or 6 months. So once it's stated, people are saying that I've gone for loan and put up the premises, and you are telling me to take 6 months. Don't forget that the house has come to stay. And we don't take only 1 month or 2 years to maybe recoup your investment. It is there. So if we are to build a country, we need to make sure the law works and both landlord tenants will have their peace. Because we are all within the country, and when we talk of citizens, we are the citizens, and the law is meant for the citizens.
Okay.
So something in addition to that, just under the section, but you ask of the penalty. Under section 25(5), it says any person who has a condition of grant, renewal or continuancy of a tenancy demand in the case of monthly or short tenancy, the payment in advance or more than a month's rent, or in the case of a tenancy exceeding 6 months, the payment in advance of more than 6 months' rent, shall be guilty of an offense and upon conviction be liable to a fine not exceeding 500 penalty units, which is equivalent to 6,000, or a term of imprisonment not exceeding 2 years.
Or both.
Okay, or both. So when you flout this law, this is the penalty. You pay 500 penalty unit, or in imprisonment not exceeding 2 years, or both. So this is the caution we are sending, that landlords should take note of this. The law says don't demand and don't receive.
So if you could be paying 6,000 Ghana cedis, or you go to jail for up to 2 years,
yes, a maximum.
Or you could get both.
Exactly.
For charging rental advance of more than 6 months.
Yes.
Then too many people have to be in jail. Or they should be paying this fine so that the state will be rich.
Get some money, or the department can even be resourced. Okay.
Yeah. So
but the implementation.
Talking about resourcing the department, the point where they are supposed to come for assessment and get a certificate, renewal, they have to come to you.
These are all internal generated funds we can do.
But
somebody came to my office. He was complaining about how deteriorated our Tema office is. I asked him, as a landlord, have you paid rent tax before? He said, no, we are all guilty.
Yes.
So if all of us will put our hands on deck, we can make the Ghana what we want. But you collect so much.
What's the rent tax?
Okay.
The rent tax.
The rent tax, if you look under section 115 of the rent tax, okay, it talks about withholding taxes. And then that withholding taxes is for residential and non-residential. The residential, you pay 8% of the rent advance you collect from any tenant. And then if it's a non-residential, being commercial, you pay 15%. So this is what the GRA has exposed. It has been our needs, rent control needs for a long time as part of our cut issue, the rent cut, which if your producers. So we talk about the rent card, which all landlords might issue within 2 weeks after the tenancy has been signed.
There's something called rent card.
Rent cut.
That all landlords must issue to tenants.
Exactly.
Within
2 weeks.
2 weeks
after the tenancy has been signed. So this tenant should demand also from landlords. It's your right to demand this rent card after you made payment of rent advance.
What is it?
The rent card is a card, okay, that has details of the landlord, details of the tenant. We have an emergency number or a guarantee number so that in case something happens to the tenant, you, the landlord, can fall on for an assistant. When you look inside the card, we have your monthly payment because rent comes in payment. Even if you pay 6 months rent advance, it must be distributed in monthly. And it comes in twos, okay? The landlord will hold one, the tenant will hold one, so that there will be no dispute. That's it.
Okay, so, so if you pay in January, then it says month, amount paid, arrears outstanding, then date of payment, and then signature of the receiver.
Exactly.
Okay, so you use this to sort of keep accounts.
Keep an account.
Okay, and then there are details for both the tenant and the landlord. And their addresses also. Okay.
Okay.
Right.
And we talked about the tenancy agreement, which is key. We talk about receipt of payment. So I'll give you the rent advance. Immediately the law demands that you give me receipt. And then the rent tax that we've just talked about. So it has been our needs, just as I mentioned.
You say every landlord is expected to issue this.
Exactly, mandatory.
And they are supposed to get it from you.
Any of our offices.
Okay.
Let me help you.
There are two of them. Landlord keeps one, and
the
then
tenant
keeps one.
Yes.
Let me
All
help
right.
you here.
Yes, please.
By issuing of the receipt, it will even help the rent officer to even determine the 8% of your rent tax to the state. So it is our even mandate. At time when a landlord comes and it's a problem of maybe the receipt, we only demand the receipt. Have you paid your rent tax? He said no. Then you have to call in the GRA people to go and pay the tax before even handle the case. And
somebody sent in a question. Is asking, are you available at the assemblies, district assemblies?
Oh, okay. Of late, yes. In fact, previously we were having problems over there, but now we've given them a series of letters through our mother ministry.
Who? You have given who letters?
The assembles, so through our mother ministry. So now the assembles are providing offices for us.
So you are not everywhere. You are now seeking to ensure that you are in the assemblies. You are not there.
Just in addition, just as he mentioned, we currently have 56 offices across the country. Of course, we are supposed to be in the 260 district, municipal, and metropolitan assemblies. But what we are doing is, we realize that cases does not come from all the assemblies. Okay, sometimes for a whole year, only one case, like the northern parts. So what we do is that we look at a vantage assembly and then serve the adjacent assemblies.
All right.
So, but the discussion on the new act also mandates every district assembly to provide accommodation where we will send our expertise to come and
man had mentioned that the agents who lead people, they are entitled to only 5% And the 5% is on the rent advance paid.
Yes.
It's not money that must come from...
No.
So it will not be paid out by the landlord?
No, it's paid by the landlord, not the tenant. The tenant, after the landlord have come in with the agent, it's the landlord responsibility to pay the agent.
Not the tenant instead?
Not the tenant. Instead.
Rather?
Yeah, so, yes, just to add up to... You know, I always cite this example of general insurance business. They have recruited and sent out this sales agent to go and fetch out clients for the insurance business. It's only when you bring a client that the client pays the premium, that a commission is given to you.
Right.
So if you look at section 25(1)(c), it says, being or acting as an agent or broker, or go between demand or receive for the services in connection with the procuring of any grant, renewal, continuance, or assessment of a tenancy, any condition which exceeds 5% per centum of the recoverable rent for a year of such premises. So if you go contrary to this, you commit an offense. What this means is that when you bring a client to the landlord, and the person is satisfied with the condition, the tenancy is sealed, and the prospective tenant pays the rent, the landlord is supposed to give you 5% of that rent advance that has been paid. Of course, if the tenancy is signed for 2 years, you don't expect to be given 5% of the 2 years. What the law states is that you should be given 5% of 1 year rent. So if I come for 6 months, only 5% of the 6 months should be given to me. If I sign for 2 years, and I'm paying for 6 months in block, I'll be giving the first 6 months, and then the second 6 months. The rest, unless you bring somebody else. So the law says that you should be giving 5% of the rent advance. It's not your right to take 10% from the tenant, take 10% from the landlord, and even ask for moving fee.
Yes, moving
These are all illegal things.
That's why they are searching for it for you.
And they know you are looking for a single room. They will take you to a 2-bedroom house. You pay for it. They move you. Somebody complained of paying as much as 600 Ghana cedis just for moving fee. This has been realized. Discussions are ongoing. Very soon they will be trained properly. They will be licensed. They will be certified. Their names will be published. If you go contrary to these provisions, we will just withdraw your license and certificate, take your name from the list, and then those who want to deal with agents will look at the list and deal with accredited people. So Ghanaians should be assured that this problem has been identified. Measures have been taken to flush out these Goro boys in quote from our system.
Interesting. So whilst we listen to them, they are the duty bearers. They've been given the responsibility to assist us, landlords and tenants. We have a role to play. If we don't insist on the right things, we may not get the right things done. So for me, that's important for all of us. But there are people who are afraid that once my landlord is doing something wrong and I report, it's going to lead into animosity and I will not be properly dealt with. They would actually eject me, move me from my house. What should I do?
You just come to rent control and file the case. No matter what the situation, the law is there to protect everybody. And as I said, when you've got to know that it's purely inducing tenant to quit, it is an offense even, whereby we need to refer the matter. In fact, after giving recommendation...
What is it that you say is an offense?
The inducing tenant. It means that doing something to defray or to get the tenant out before his prescribed period.
Things like what?
For instance, disconnecting of his light. I will not allow you to bath in the bathroom. I have locked the toilet. I've done that. Trying to get him out.
Or I get loud music to your, your doorstep.
Second,
just to get you to move out.
Move out. So
that's inducing the tenant to move, and it's an offense.
It's an offense. So when such case is investigated properly, and we got to know that really that is so, we, the office, need to protect you.
Okay.
When it becomes worse, we'll refer to the matter.
What sort of protections do you offer to a person like that? Yes.
Okay. So just the inducement case, if you look at section 27 of the Rent Act, it says offense for inducing tenants to quit. Okay, so if a tenant has reported you for going contrary to the act, and you want to do things that will prompt the person to move out, constitute an inducement. And they said, every person who shall do any act whatsoever or refrain from doing anything which the condition of the tenancy requires him to do, with intent to compel the lessee of the premises to give up possession thereof, shall be guilty of an offense and shall, on conviction by the magistrate, be liable to a fine not exceeding 50 penalty unit, which is minimum 600 Ghana cedis, or an imprisonment. So if you report somebody and the person wants to induce you, do things that will prompt you to move out, falls under this act, where we can lie you before the magistrate for you to be prosecuted and then be fined or go to imprisonment. So this is the protection that
that one I thought they would just make you pay the fine, which is up to 600 Ghana cedis, and it's okay. But imprisonment too is there.
No, there's no imprisonment here. It's only the fine of 600 Ghana.
Okay, right.
Just to caution you from inducing anybody to quit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We are going for a quick break. When we return, I will speak to Mr. Biney and let him take leave of us on the aspects of we're dovetailing affordable housing into this, what we can do, what the state can do to assist, to ameliorate the circumstances that many people find themselves in. And then we'll open the phone lines, you ask your questions, and then my guest will answer them. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's the most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. And like we have committed ourselves to do once in a while, like we did with the education on the land law to you, we are doing today rent, but putting a bit of the need for affordable housing into it. Now, the government has a policy. It's a 2019 policy where it says that the existing Rent Act is currently undergoing review to incorporate best practices from other countries. The review is intended to safeguard the rights of vulnerable tenants who have been outpriced by the uncomfortable hike in the cost of renting accommodation, and also ensure that property developers are not discouraged from investing in the housing industry by rigid rent control mechanisms that suppress chargeable rent to artificial levels. So very soon there's going to be a new law in which we understand that the 6 months will be moved to 1 year. So you don't charge rents advance more than 1 year. I will announce the lines, but don't call now. I'm going to speak to Mr. Biney briefly, and then we'll come, and then it will be just us with the rent officers here to continue to give you solutions. The lines to call, write it down, don't call, 030-221-1691. 030-221-1691 or 020-221-1692. 1692. Keep that. I'll announce shortly for you to come in with it. Thank you very much for your patience, Mr. Biney. Now, what's your solution to the affordable housing situation, the 2 million housing deficit, and the fact that about 60% of Ghanaians can't even afford them if they were made available, and they will need assistance to be able to afford?
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, okay. The government is, it's for government to provide that assistance. It will cost a whole lot of money, which I don't think we have. But government currently has put in place certain instruments that would help. For instance, the NHMF, which is the National Housing Fund, and will be able to help people get mortgages at subsidized rates for the lower end of the market. And so government has taken this segment of the market, and they are trying to fix the problem there. This segment of the market also includes majority of the lower end of affordability. And so it would go a long way to fix a lot of the problems. But it then leads into supply and where those houses are going to come from. As Greta has actually been speaking with government, with the current minister, and a lot of headway is being made. Government has recently acquired 4,500 acres around the Accra and Kumasi area for affordable housing, which will meet the criteria for the affordable housing products that government has made available through the Ministry of Finance. They've also set up a real estate investment trust, which would help administer the whole framework which they put in place. And so government is doing its bit. The private developer is also doing a lot and is also able to provide housing, but the capacity to provide what is actually needed is not there, even if we are looking at just the 40% who can afford. But Thompson, if we look at the market, you would hardly find anyone who says, I can afford to buy a home, I'm gainfully employed, and I can afford this that costs dollars, but can't find one. Demand, and I talk about effective demand for developers who are playing in the affordable housing area overboard, and that is why the prices have remained where they are. People are building houses for $35,000, $40,000 and putting them, and I use dollars advisedly, and I know you will take me up with that. I use that advisedly.
Right.
So, yeah.
In fact, people are charging rent in dollars.
Yes, that is not allowed by law. The Ministry of Finance looks very dimly upon that, and if you are caught, it could be problematic.
Right.
What people sometimes say is they link it to the dollar, and it's basically because, for instance, for the property developed, a facility denominated in dollars.
Right.
To be able to get an interest rate they can work with. Okay?
Yeah.
They can't, when they come out and they delink or they are lending currency from what is actually on the ground, they get into problems with their lenders because what you collect today is not worth what you collect tomorrow.
All right. So in a minute, tell me or re-emphasize what you started earlier with. How can the rent control department and everybody ensure that the rent laws are working?
The rent control department, like they've also alluded to, I mean, their capacity is not there to meet what to do what the law is asking them to do. But I feel that we are over-regulating in the sense that if we are asking agents to collect no more than 5%, okay, then we are capping their income. And very soon they will add to the demand for affordable housing themselves because they will not be making enough money. Now, agents typically will charge a month's rent. And, that is what pertains in the marketplace. But the law is saying that they'll go to prison. They charge a month's rent. And so we realize that we are getting into areas or commercial areas, maybe the framers of the law had not particularly intended it to be such.
Okay.
So,
I suppose we'll have to take time and deal with this aspect of the housing provision, which is your area of comfort. Thank you so very much, Biney, Director, Vine CBH Group, and immediate past Executive Council member of GREDA. Thank you so very much, sir.
Having me.
Right. Now, the phone lines are active. You can call and ask your question. Put it directly to Emmanuel or Mr. Ampofo, 030-221-1691 or 1692. And as the calls come in, there's Eduanaba Kweku Amponsa. He says that I rented a house. It's my landlord being fair to me. I rented a room for 2 years and paid. This was in 2019. And my rent will expire on the 1st of September 2021. My landlord gave me a letter last month that he wants to do renovation in my room, so I should move. I should move when my rent expires, i.e. 1st of September. Is the landlord being fair to me? Yes.
The landlord, the law states clearly that when you mention of renovation, it's fall under section 17 I and I3. But the point is, you have to give the notice to quit to the tenant after the lease, after the period rented or the prescribed period.
Okay.
And the 6 months will follow after the lease. So he has no right to.
All right. Julius, you're calling from Accra. Julius, what's your question?
I rented my place to a tenant for a period of 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And after a lapse of the place, he pleaded for another 3 months, which he was supposed to pay. He didn't pay. Now we are in the 4th month, and he has locked my place and traveled. I can't find him anywhere.
All right. What should you do? All right. We have Daniel. You're calling from Medina. Hello, Daniel.
Yes. They are saying that agents have to take their money from the... Yes, I'm saying that they're saying that agents must take their money from the landlords. However, if the tenants or potential tenants are asking agents to do them a service, must do them a service, so the agent will be going around to look for accommodation for them. I think that service must be paid for, because he's going around to look for something for you. He may not have had it already.
All right.
Also,
thank you.
Landlord can
Thank you. I'll take only a question from each person. Patrick. Hello, Patrick. You're calling from Tema.
Yes, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Please, I rented a place for 2 years. Ever since I moved into the room, whenever it rains, when I'm not in, all my stuff will get wet. I've been complaining to my landlord, and then he is always saying that we the tenants in the house, are disturbing him. Moreover, our manhole, ever since I moved in about 4 months now, we've taken the water out 3 times. This is a major problem. Our landlord is always saying that we shouldn't call him and then say anything to him.
Okay, thank you. Your point is noted. Okay, so you can take Julius. Julius says we are done. Julius says that he paid for 2 years. He gave his land for his house for a room for 2 years. The person, it expired. The person pleaded for three months or so. Yeah. Now he's gone and he's locked the place. What should he do?
Okay. So this is a typical what we call an abscondant case. Julius should quickly come to the rent control department. We'll follow the due process and force opening the door.
Okay.
Julius cannot go there and force open the door because the tenant can come that something is missing.
All right.
So Julius should quickly come to the rent control office. The issue about agents is that always the landlord who contracts agents to get prospective tenant for them. If you bring a post that you are an agent, which means you have vacant premises available. And then somebody calls you now before you are going to look for, then you can't call yourself an agent.
Okay.
So tenant has no right to pay that percentage to the agent.
Okay.
And then the issue about renovation, this must be spelled out in the tenancy agreement. The responsibility of maintenance should be spelled out in the tenancy agreement. So if it comes to interior maintenance that the landlord has given you the right to do, then you have to do it. If it's external one, like this manhole, it's a sole responsibility of the landlord.
And
if
the leakage, and the leakage too.
And the leakage too is the responsibility of the landlord.
If the landlord is not doing, I'm the one living in. I get
But of course, you have to be compensated for the rent advance you've paid. And if the landlord is not forfeited dues, come to the rent control department. We'll invite him, do our investigation, and then we apply the law where it needs to be.
You could allow Patrick to do it by himself, and then it will become rent.
Exactly.
Okay.
So all must be in the agreement.
Is, Patrick is the one living in the room for
right.
now. He is suffering from the problem. So the question is, if you have asked the landlord
right.
to maintain that very particular damage and is not doing anything, we only invite the landlord to the office. His failure to come, we only ask the tenant to maybe come with expertise for us to maybe assess the
Entry James says that he has rented an apartment, he doesn't like it anymore. What should he do? He wants his money back and then to go.
No, okay. Entry, has he paid in advance?
Yes, he's paid.
Okay.
Yeah.
In fact, as the law states, no one have to take rent advance more than whatever.
6 months.
6 months. So Entry have paid the money. This case do happen. You have taken 6 months advance. Now the tenant want to go. It will be either he has got a transfer from his office, or he has to travel elsewhere. You cannot say that you can't refund the money. Entry should report to the office and we'll make enforcement to take the money for him.
Okay. We just have run out of time. We didn't know that this is how we're getting to. So let's take your final word. Okay. What are your expectations of tenants and landlords, generally?
Okay. Well, the landlords and tenants are all our friends, so far as the rent control is concerned. So we are only urging them that the rent control is open for everybody. If you found out that somebody is actually harassing you in your house, taking rent in advance, doing which is contrary to the law, please, you can come to rent control and we'll help you out.
Right. What would you have to say?
So something. Let me assure Ghanaians that there is this National Rental Assistance Scheme, which is under discussion, which is going to solve this short to medium term rent advance payment, but people who can be guaranteed of paying their rent advance. The digitalization of the rent control department is also going to speed up our processes. But what I want to end with is that we all have responsibility to make sure the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal is achieved. If you look at the first target of Goal 11, it states by 2030, we should ensure access for all to adequate, safe, and affordable housing. Okay? As a landlord, you have a responsibility to make sure the rooms you give out, you don't overcharge. As a tenant, you have a responsibility to make sure that where you go and rent, you leave it as tenantable as you go and meet it. Myself, as a rent officer, I should make out that I control the rent that landlords charge or tenants pay. So let's all put our hands on deck. It's a country all of us want to fix. So let's put our hands on deck so that we can fix the country as we want it to be.
Thank you very, very much for coming and helping educate our audiences. You heard Chum Ampofo, who is Chief Rent Officer, Rent Control Department, to my left, and Emmanuel Hove Posu, who is Head Public Relations, Rent Control Department. Earlier, you heard Kojo Biney, who is Director and former executive member of the Council of the Greda. And as always, let's all be citizens, okay? Let's not be spectators. Let's contribute to ensure that the laws are working. If a landlord is breaking the law, report them and let the right things be done. If a tenant is breaking the law, report them and let the right things be done. Don't take the law into your own hands. This show has been brought to you by Bank of Africa. Strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders. Robert and Son, seeing is believing. Waylead, home is where you start. Star Assurance, that's your solid partner. First Code Management Service, industry get it right. The new school, knowledge, compassion, leadership. Duraplus, where Duraplus goes, water flows. And my outfit that many of you are talking about is by Habil's Couture. Habil's Couture. You can call them on 0200 841988. 0200 841988. You can find them at Adringano, opposite Villa David. Go there and get the best of dress like this for yourself. Thank you very much. I'm Samson Ladia Yanini. God willing, next week we come your way with another edition of Newsfile.